Thanks for joining us. I'm Christine Romans. CNN This Morning starts right now.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 25th. Welcome to CNN This Morning. We're so glad you're with us. And we do begin, though, with news about this show. As you may have heard yesterday, CNN parted ways with anchor Don Lemon. In a statement, CNN CEO Chris Licht thanked Don for his contributions over the past 17 years, writing in part, "Don will forever be a part of the CNN family. We wish him well and will be cheering him on in his future endeavors."
Absolutely. Of course, Don was a big part of this show over the last 6 months. He was one of the first anchors on CNN to have me on his show. That's something I'll obviously never forget. I agree with Chris. We wish him the best.
Yeah, we certainly do. Don was one of my first friends here at CNN. I'm so thankful to have worked alongside him and for his support for nearly 15 years here, and I wish him all good things ahead. Kaitlan and I are really proud of this show. We are so proud of the dedicated team that works around the clock to bring you the news every morning, and our priority is you, the viewer. We're grateful you welcome us into your home each morning.
Absolutely. And of course, this morning we want to keep it with the focus on the news and where that belongs. So let's get to it. CNN This Morning starts right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we do begin with
big news.
Big news, significant breaking news. President Biden has made it official, announcing he is running for re-election. Just moments ago, he released this announcement video. Watch.
Freedom, personal freedom, is fundamental to who we are as Americans. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred. That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what health care decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love, all while making it more difficult for you to be able to vote. When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
Today is a very symbolic day for this announcement. It is the 4-year anniversary of Biden entering the 2020 presidential race. So let's start out with Arlette Saenz at the White House. We thought it was going to come today, probably. It came today, and he came out swinging against Republicans on abortion rights, book bans, Social Security, a number of things.
Yeah, he did. Good morning, Poppy. President Biden really is finally making it official, and he drew on those same themes from his 2020 campaign, as he said in that video that the battle for the soul of the country is not yet complete and voters should give him a second term in office. The president took aim at what he described as MAGA extremists in the Republican Party. He used that imagery from January 6th as well as protesters following the Supreme Court's decision on abortion last summer. And additionally, in that video, you saw the president highlight two men who he could face off against in a general election matchup. That is former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has yet to formally enter the 2024 race. But ultimately, President Biden is hoping that Americans will look at his record on things like infrastructure and climate change and decide to give him a second term in office. Now, advisors that I spoke to said that just because he's launching watching this campaign today don't expect his day-to-day activities to really change. They believe that ultimately the president's ability to win over voters is to show that he is doing the job of being president. A bit later today, he will be speaking at a union conference as he looks to highlight his ties to labor groups. But one area where you will see the Biden team really ramp up their activity is when it comes to fundraising. They know that they need to mobilize both those high-dollar donors as well as grassroots supporters. But as all of this campaign is coming into focus, coming into shape today, there are still significant challenges facing President Biden as he seeks a second term in office. His approval ratings are hovering in the low 40%. And additionally, the majority of Americans have said that they do not believe he should run for a second term, with many of those doubters saying that one of the chief issues is his age. But President Biden's allies and he believe that ultimately voters will side with his record and choose him over the alternatives that they're seeing in the Republican Party.
Okay, Arlette Saenz, big day behind you at the White House. Thanks so much.
Yeah, one of the biggest days that any White House has. For more on this, we want to bring in CNN contributor and staff writer at The New Yorker, Evan Osnos, who has written books about President Biden, including Joe Biden, The Life, The Run, and What Matters Now. That, of course, Evan, was about the 2020 run that happened, as you know, 4 years ago today. April 25th, 2019 is when Biden made it official. And now you're seeing this again. What are you expecting from this run? Because it is going to look a lot different than 2020 did.
Yeah, it's quite striking that he came out of the gate right away saying, look, in effect, this is about some big issues. You didn't hear him doing what presidents or incumbents sometimes do, which is talk about some of the bills they've passed. What he did was go to the heart of the matter. In the end, this is about, as he said in 2020, to his mind, this is about a battle for the soul of the nation. He started this video on the word freedom, and he ended, importantly, on the idea that this is a project that remains unfinished. I think that's the theme that's going to tie this 2020 campaign message, this idea of fighting for some fundamental ideas about America, with the reason why he would argue it's his job to do it, because it is a project unfinished. And as you heard him say in the State of the Union, he wants to finish the job, and that's going to be the theme you'll hear going forward.
What's interesting, I think, is that he wants to finish the job while facing increasing headwinds and some concern among members of his own party. So whether it's Joe Manchin just in the last, 12 hours coming out and saying, look, Biden administration, you better do what you promised to do on energy and investment, or I'm going to vote to repeal the IRA, right? A huge legislative achievement. Or Democrats who privately told CNN they're worried that Biden isn't sitting down with McCarthy and willing to give a little on the debt ceiling.
Yeah, in a way, he knows going into this that there are significant challenges. Just look at his popularity. I mean, he's way lower than he would want to be. Obviously, the big question for a lot of people is about age. And there's two ways you can handle that. In a moment like this, you can either tackle those head on. But in this moment, what he said was, no, we have to go larger than that. This is an election that is, once again, not going to rest on people's kind of small ball mechanical political decisions. It's going to rest on fundamental choices about what kind of candidate you believe is a better fit for the United States. So, this is the beginning of the process, and eventually his goal is to try to say, we'll bring Democrats around to us.
And Evan, how does he handle the age thing in your view? Because CNN's K-File has uncovered some reporting, this is obviously back when Biden was 29 years old, but he was running against a 63-year-old, and he made age an issue. He had several ads where he was running against Cale Boggs, and in these ads he, would say things like, Cale doesn't want to run. He's lost that old twinkle in his eye that he used to have. He placed ads against him with the slogan saying, he understands what's happening today, highlighting issues that were impacting voters at the time versus what Boggs had previously campaigned on, really drawing that contrast that many people are now drawing, even if they do so privately. How does Biden handle the age issue today?
Yeah, in some ways where you stand depends on where you sit. And in this moment, he is finding himself in a bit of a role reversal. In that first election, 1972, he really did have the image of being the voice of a new generation. He was an opponent of the Vietnam War. He would tell you today that this is a moment in which there will be a time for a new generation of leadership. And in his view, he has begun that process by bringing them into the White House. If you look at the diversity of this administration in terms of race and gender, it really really is more diverse than the previous two administrations in his appointments to the federal bench. But it is going to be an argument he has to make to Americans that in the midst of a continuing crisis about the very basic rights as Americans, about abortion, about democracy, about voting, that this is a time, he would say, to put a proven asset there before we turn the page.
Reminded of what David Gergen, CNN contributor and former advisor to 4 presidents, Republicans and Democrats, said on this network about a year ago, talking about 2024 and Trump and Biden, and if it was a matchup and both of their ages. And he said, we've never seen anything like that before. I think it's a real risk. And he talked about how he felt when he turned 80. And he said, you know, you're not quite, your judgment isn't quite as clear as it was. And I just thought it was notable to hear David say that, because now that is what the American people are looking at, as the incumbent president and the front runner, Donald Trump, in the Republican Party, both very old.
It's true. You know, I once had an interview with then Vice President Biden about the subject of age. We were talking about this question, and I said, how do you think about it? And he said, you know, I actually regret once that we encouraged my own father to retire when we did. I think it was sooner than he needed to. He said, if you still feel you can do the job and you have physical health, then I think you should be able to do it. And if you fast forward to today, you know, that's how he sees it. And I think, oddly enough, actually running against Donald Trump, if he is the front runner in the end, if he is the nominee, that undermines the age argument for Republicans, because after all, Donald Trump has already been the oldest president in American history before when he was in office, and so it makes it a harder case to make. Joe Biden would say, you know, look at me, look at my record, and look at the stakes of this election.
Yeah, it would be a much sharper contrast if it's Governor DeSantis.
I was just saying, a good point, Evan, because people who we know are going to get in the race haven't gotten in the race yet.
And that's why the White House wants the Republican nominee to be Trump, that and for many other reasons. Evan Osnos, thank you so much for that insight this morning. And of course, we'll continue to follow this announcement throughout the day. Ahead in our 7 o'clock hour, we are going to be joined by Republican presidential candidate, not former President Trump, but Asa Hutchinson, to get his view on Biden's re-election announcement.
I look forward to that. We are set to find out this summer, we've learned, whether an Atlanta area prosecutor will criminally charge former President Trump in Georgia's 2020 election interference case. The Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, has sent a letter to law enforcement saying the announcement could come anytime between July 11th and September 1st. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution first reported that letter. Willis sending a warning to law enforcement because she says the case, quote, may provoke significant public reaction. She is weighing whether to charge Trump or any of his allies for their attempts to overturn the results of Georgia's 2020 election. So let's bring in our senior crime and justice reporter, Kaitlan Collins, who joins us now. I mean, it was a surprising letter to send. She outlined sort of this 2-month time frame, and there's a whole host of folks outside of the former president who could be charged in this. What's your take?
That's right. So we know that there are more than a dozen people that could be charged, but at the top of the list is Donald Trump, the former president who is clearly under investigation here. His behavior in Georgia, that phone call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, that is all something that Fani Willis and her team are looking at, that the grand jury, the special grand jury, already investigated and have made recommendations, and now we're just waiting for these charging decisions. So this letter from Fani Willis, the district attorney in Fulton County, Poppy and Kaitlan, it says a couple things. It says, quite frankly, that Fani Willis does plan to announce charging decisions in the 2020 election investigation. So that confirmation that they are going to be coming to a conclusion here pretty soon, giving the timeline. It's essentially an 8-week period in July going through the end of August when those charging decisions would be announced. And the reason is this concern over security. So this letter doesn't say that Donald Trump himself will be indicted. That is something that remains to be seen. The grand jury will have to look at. But there's a clear subtext here that Donald Trump supporters may be quite angry. And here's what Willis writes in her letter. Open source intelligence has indicated the announcement of decisions in this case may provoke a significant public reaction. And she goes on, we have seen in recent years that some may go outside of public expressions of opinion that are protected by the First Amendment to engage in acts of violence that will endanger the safety of our community. As leaders, it is incumbent upon us to prepare. She's not mentioning January 6th itself, but obviously she's investigating the lead up to that event, the Capitol riot, and that seems to be a nod there.
Okay, Kaitlan Collins, thank you so much. It's interesting because this follows not seeing an outbreak of violence in New York after the charges.
Yeah, but it is interesting to see just how they're preparing so far in advance.
So
and
far in
giving them a
advance.
heads up, and of course the indications. People read into that what that could mean and who they could be
And
charging.
using the word significant in there.
We'll see what that looks like. We will obviously stay on top of that with Kaitlan Collins. Also coming up, there are new images of American diplomats who have just been rescued from war-torn Sudan. We're now learning that the United States is sending warships and possibly troops to help those who are still trapped.
And the police officer who fired the shot that killed Breonna Taylor in a botched raid now has a new job. How her family's reacting.
Are you surprised?
Can't say that I am. It's this good old boy system.